But again, on behalf of the entire company, thank you all for joining us today. It really is always our pleasure to tell the story about this company. It is a very unique company with a different story and a very different product, and it is our pleasure to do so. We've done a number of these presentations previously. I think almost all have been in Stockholm. Actually, we did one up in Gothenburg. But as we are a Skåne-based company, this is the first time we've actually had the chance to chat with a group down here. Company's based right up the street in Lund. So thank you all for taking the time to attend. I'd like to take a moment, actually. We're going to do a slightly different presentation than we have in the past for a couple of reasons. This really is an inflection point for the company. We have undertaken a tremendous effort to change a lot of the things that we're doing in this organization. So this really is sort of a new start for the company. Further, one of our larger investors actually told me the presentation I was doing previously was boring, and he was right. We were not quite telling the story correctly. We've been so very focused on bringing both a new device to market and changing our business model that we hadn't really taken the time to address the changes we've made, who we are as a company, where we're going in the future. And that's really the thing I'd like to start with today. And one thing I had noticed I had never actually done in any of the previous presentations was talk about the name of the company. Dignitana is the name of the company. But where does that name come from? It's Latin for dignity. But beyond dignity, it also means worth and merit. And that's what this company does. This company affords patients that are undergoing chemotherapy, which in many cases really ends up being one of the most difficult period for patients in a patient's life. And how do we do it? We offer patients the ability to go through chemotherapy with a level of privacy, identity, and control that they would not have otherwise. This is a patient who actually has used a scalp cooling process during chemotherapy to maintain their hair. This is a photo 6 weeks after her 6th and final round of chemotherapy, and I'll talk more about her in a minute. This is a typical patient after 6 rounds of chemotherapy. Most chemo agents are unable to distinguish between naturally rapidly dividing cells like those that grow your hair versus rapidly mutating cells which are cancerous. And as such, hair is often a side effect. Hair loss is a side effect of most chemo agents. The patient on the left is actually my wife. This beautiful lady is my wife, Lizzie, after a 6th and final round of chemo. And this is how I have gotten into this, both this company, this therapy, and it's why it's a very, very important part of my life. I went through 6 rounds of chemo by applying a very cold cap. This is back in 2011. Back then, the only way to actually reduce a patient's scalp temperature were to use these very, very difficult and painful caps that had to be changed out every 20 minutes for up to 7 hours on an infusion day. However, it worked, and it worked very, very well. And after she was finished, the oncologist that we worked with asked me if I might help other patients. Up to 8% of female patients will forego chemotherapy altogether for fear of hair loss. And this oncologist suggested she had a number of patients that were in that very same position. Would I help them with this legacy non-FDA cleared product? And I did, and over the next 12 months, I started getting calls from all over the United States with people asking me if I could help them. So that's when I first recognized that there really was an opportunity here to both help people and do this on a larger scale. How do we do it? This is, on the left is our new scalp cooling device, the Delta product. The right is our legacy C3 product. And what these products do is, via a cap applied to a patient's head on the day of chemotherapy, while they receive their chemotherapy, hypothermically reduce their scalp temperature. By hypothermically reducing a scalp temperature to a very targeted range, you're able to induce 2 physiological conditions. The first is vasoconstriction, the constriction of the blood vessels, which impedes the flow of chemo agents to the hair follicle. And secondly, you slow metabolic processes. So whichever chemo agents are actually delivered to the hair follicle are not absorbed. I'm Bill Cronin. I'm the CEO of AB. As I've said, I am not Swedish. I am involved simply because the company recognized the United States was a significant market for the product. I joined back in 2015. I have significant global experience from my previous days in the financial world, setting up businesses and running businesses around the world. I'm the father of 3 children, 2 dogs, and most importantly, the husband of a cancer survivor. That one experience really has shaped almost everything I've done since 2012 with this product, with this company, and everything about it. I saw firsthand just how important this therapy option was. I believe in Dignitana. I'm a significant investor in this company, and I believe in the therapy option as a real advancement in support of cancer care. The company itself was first traded on the First North Stock Exchange in 2011. We have roughly a 250 million SEK market valuation. Our headquarters are in London, just up the road, but the vast majority of our operational activity is actually done in Dallas, Texas. What does the company look like today? Who are our largest shareholders? There are 57% of the shares are held with 10 individual folks. Several of the largest investors are actually here with us today. Mr. Greg Nagizian is a newer shareholder of the company over the past 6 to 8 months and has increased his position fairly significantly. I am also a fairly significant shareholder through my partnership, controlling just about 9% of the shares, as well as several other senior management and other individual investors. Why Dignitana? Why today? What is this company doing differently? Our device starts with efficacy, and that's a term that's used often in the medical community regarding, does it work? Does your product provide the outcome that it is indicated for usage? The indication is also another term that the FDA uses. What is your product supposed to do? Our product is supposed to keep a patient's hair while they undergo chemotherapy. Without it, they would 100% lose their certainty, lose their hair. So everything we do starts with product efficacy. Does it do what we wish it to do? And it does. As this is a relatively recently cleared therapy, only in December of 2015, we need to raise awareness. There is still a significant lack of awareness on behalf of both physicians and patients that keeping your hair during chemo is an option. Acceptance, increasing acceptance, again, on behalf of the oncological and patient community, that this is good, this works, this is something we should try. All of those things, as we search to increase those values, will ultimately drive both the top and bottom line for the company. Cancer is, unfortunately, very much a growth industry. Each year, 17.5 million new individuals around the world will be diagnosed with cancer. And from those patients, a significant number have the opportunity to use our product. Right now, it's 17.5 million. By 2040, that number actually will grow to 27.5 million. That's 65% growth over the next 20 years. And as we go through this period of incredible scientific and healthcare advances, the fact that A, patients' populations are living longer and B, living less healthy lives is why we are seeing higher incidences of cancer. So the available patient base, unfortunately, continues to grow each and every year. What does that translate to in terms of market potential for this product? What we look at, essentially, a demographic of female patients between the ages of 30 and 65 that have been diagnosed with a malignancy of breast, ovarian, or uterine cancer. In the United States, when we look at all of the different malignancies and all of the different diagnoses each year, that essentially boils down to roughly a $600 million per year market opportunity. When we look at those same statistics globally, and we only look at the highly developed and very highly developed countries, according to the American Cancer Society, that comes down to a $1.3 billion global opportunity. Total. So as I've mentioned previously, cancer incidences continue to expand. Ultimately, you could be looking at as much as a $2 billion a year revenue opportunity. How does this company work? What do? We supply our device to cancer treatment centers, and we do that through 3 different avenues. directly, through distributors, and also to, well, we don't actually do it to patients, but we supply the devices directly to the facilities, and then we have 3 different revenue opportunities. From the centers where they're either leasing the device, as we do in the United States. We use a pay-per-treatment model in the US, and I'll go into that more in a moment. Outside the US, where we sell directly, which is primarily continental Europe and a few other select markets, we will sell the device completely, but then after the device is sold, and this is the new Delta unit I'm talking about, we will create a recurring revenue model through the sale of disposables. Then through the distributors, we'll also sell the devices and then again create that recurring revenue stream from the disposables that are associated with the new Delta unit. So again, in the US, we have a pay-per-treatment model where we will lease the facility an actual device, and then either the facility or the patients will pay us for both the disposables associated with the device as well as a pay-per-treatment model. And that is our highest revenue and margin opportunity for the company. This slide is a unique way to display in the US how our revenue model is generated on a per unit basis. We'll place a device with a small monthly lease at the facility, and then it will start to accrue an ascending revenue stream. And that revenue stream, depending upon uptake, every site has a slightly different uptake on patient treatments. And we look at patient sites as low, medium, and high revenue sites, none of which actually get to 100% machine utilization. If you use the device every day per month, it's roughly 21 treatments. The max we forecast is 75% usage. And we do that because of conservancy. We do have some sites that are using the device every day. In fact, many sites around the world, it has really become standard of care. I got back from Australia recently. Each of the devices we have down there is roughly 50 are used almost all day, every day. And they're a little shocked that domestically in the US it hasn't quite gotten there yet, but again, we're only 3 years into it. So we really forecast an increasing per machine utilization rate. What this model suggests is for those sites that are high utilization facilities, they will pay back the cost of placing that device in 4 months. Low utilization sites, it could be as much as 8 months. But then thereafter, the box in the green shows really the actual revenue potentials that these devices provide on an annual basis, where you could very easily make 3 to 4 times the initial investment cost on an annual basis, and these devices have an 8 to 10 year projected service life. So really, once you scale this business up, especially in the States, and place so many devices out there, the revenue opportunities really become very, very significant. What has the company done over the years? We really have been a leader in scalp cooling innovation. The product on the left was the very first iteration of the device. It was developed by a Swedish oncology nurse. She had seen firsthand the trauma that hair loss had for her patients and looked for a way to solve that. Pharmaceutical companies were solving virtually every other side effect of chemotherapy except that. So she worked with a Danish engineer and created the very first product. As you go through to the right, the Delta device, which is, again, our newest device, which we have a CE mark for now, is the device that really will help us capture the revenue opportunities this industry provides. First device was invented all the way back in 2000. It received FDA clearance in 2015, and when it was originally cleared by the FDA, and the FDA uses cleared for medical devices, not approved. When it was cleared, it was enabled to use, the indication was for female breast cancer patients only. In 2017, we submitted an additional 510K requesting that indication be expanded to all patients with solid tumors, and that was granted again in the summer of 2017. That one expansion of our indication increased the market in the United States by 5 times for the company. 2018, we transferred the majority of operations to Dallas, Texas, where I reside. Essentially, the company recognizing that the US really is the primary driver at this point for the future revenue growth of this company. And it's just made our decision-making and our investment process much, much more streamlined. 2019, where's the company today? We received a CE mark for our new device back in March. I just returned from Rome last evening, where we installed the very, very first of the new Delta devices at a very, very prestigious clinic in Rome. The device is anticipated to be cleared by FDA later this summer, and we have a very, very ongoing and increasing global sales pipeline for the company. Where's the company in the U.S. today? We have 167 units that are across 29 states. We have 250 devices around the world, 28 different countries. And our revenue is really starting to increase. 2018 saw a 52% year-over-year increase versus 17. And then that escalation continues. Our first quarter growth, which we actually just put our first quarter numbers out last week, came in 68% over Q1 2018. This next slide really illustrates how and why that revenue continues to increase. From the beginning of Q1 2017 through the end of April 2018, we signed contracts for 12 devices. That same period, the beginning of Q1 18 through the end of April 2019, we signed contracts for 37, actually, and this is sites, not even devices. We are really focusing on sites that have multiple clinics. In the US, there are single patient facilities or hospitals that treat just in one site, but then there are other operators that treat patients over a very wide range of offices. Those are the ones we're really focusing on, and a significant number of these new contract signings have come from that group of sites. The new device, it's Delta. Why do we call it Delta? There's actually a very significant reason for it. This is the fourth iteration of the unit. Delta is the fourth letter of the Greek alphabet, and what it means is change. And we really are in the process of changing everything about both the company, how we do business, our business model, but also scalp cooling. And this device really does change the way this therapy is offered in the United States. The symbol for Delta is triangle, three-sided triangle. And again, the three areas we're really looking to help patients during their treatment is privacy, identity, and control. This again is the new device. It is smaller. It is a single patient unit. It is dramatically easier to use. That has been one of the hurdles on the uptake of scalp cooling, especially in the US, is the amount of time it takes for a nurse to initiate and actually do a patient's treatment. Previous device took up to an hour per patient, per infusion, and frankly, that was a little too long. This device takes about 10 minutes per patient. We anticipate dramatically better outcomes with the newly engineered cap that we have, so this is the product that's going to finally allow us to realize the huge potential that this market has. Those four things that I talked about before: increased product efficacy, greater awareness, oncological and patient, and then acceptance from those same two audiences will drive the top line of this company. Our growth opportunities are significant. The U.S. is just a huge market for us. Every single year, 330,000 new incidences of breast cancer, plus another 90,000 ovarian and uterine cancers. 500,000 across Europe, and then another 1.5 million across the world. So as we bring this new product to market, as we change the way this company does business, there's basically 3 points that we're trying to get across on a very consistent basis. Easier use. This product is much simpler to use than our old device. Better patient outcomes. Everything we do starts with the patient outcome. We get the best patient outcomes on the marketplace today, both in terms of actual in-the-field performance versus our competitor, as well as from our clinical trial experience. So if you can provide those two things, easier usage, better patient outcomes, you will create a stable of better patients that want to use this particular product, which makes the sites offering this therapy option extremely happy and willing to do so. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Gunnar.
Which type of cancer treatment is causing that you lose your hair? Is it all types or just some types of treatment?
It is not the malignancy that drives hair loss. It is the chemotherapeutic agents that are delivered during the chemotherapy infusion that actually cause hair loss. And the vast majority, although there are some newer targeted therapies, especially around lung cancer, that don't create a hair loss situation, but for most solid tumor cancers, the chemo agents that a patient is infused, again, cannot distinguish between cancerous rapidly dividing cells and other cells in your body that are rapidly dividing, typically your hair and your nails.
How many % of the patients will have a hair loss?
70%. Now, one of the things this device is contraindicated before, and as I went through the slide detailing where we project revenue to actually be derived from, it is contraindicated for patients that have a hematological cancer, a blood cancer, leukemia, for example. That cancer, by its very basis, can be present all over your entire body. So they do not want to prohibit the free flow of chemo agents to that particular area, but that's a small subset of the overall cancer population. So in the United States, for the 1.7 million, roughly 1 million patients are applicable to this therapy.
Why do you keep the hair?
The science is really very simple, Gunnar. By reducing your scalp temperature hypothermically to a very targeted range, and we're looking to keep that scalp temperature between 15 and 20 degrees C during their chemo, and you start a half hour prior to the first hair loss causing agent's infusion, the duration of that, and then some period of time thereafter, 1 to 3 hours. So by keeping that in a very targeted temperature range, you constrict the blood vessel. It's called vasoconstriction. So it impedes the flow of chemo agents to the hair follicle. Not all are blocked. However, those that are blocked then are not absorbed because cellular activity, metabolism, is slowed down by, again, reducing the temperature. It's like falling through the ice, right? If somebody could fall through the ice, go to the bottom of a pond, be pulled out 30 minutes later and live, it's because essentially your body is shutting down non-essential functions due to the cold.
Is there a difference between men and women?
There really isn't. The target market is generally female, but we have very many male patients. It's just more readily accepted that a female patient would have a larger interest. And why do patients want to do this? There's really 3 primary drivers. And the first is just anonymity. If you go through chemotherapy and you lose your hair, once you lose your hair, especially as a female, you very quickly get identified as a cancer patient. So the ability for a patient to determine if they want the world to know that they are undergoing chemotherapy is a really big part of this. The second that we see most often is women with children. They don't want to scare their children because, again, once that hair falls out, you look sick. And if you have children and you wish not to let them know that mommy is ill, this is a great avenue. And the third is control, as I mentioned, that many things during the course of your chemo care are out of your control. How you feel. With this one, how you look actually can be under your control.
Could this chilling the scalp save normal persons from losing their hair?
As the CEO of the company, I get asked that a lot, and I could tell you obviously not. So, no.
Otherwise, that would be a magnificent idea.
Obviously it would, yes. And there are many smart people working on that problem right now. However, this only applies for chemotherapy-induced alopecia. Chemotherapy-induced alopecia is generally the scientific name for this, which simply means hair loss caused by chemotherapy.
Do you need to develop the Delta more, or is that just a clear product?
Well, we have the clearance in the United States is expected later this summer. This particular iteration of the product, again, is a dramatic leap forward over our existing product. We were the first to receive clearance in the United States, and we've taken that time to really get the feedback from our sites and our nursing staff partners. What would make this easier? What would make this more effective? And what really works for your site. And one of the things we found out, and I'm glad you asked because I forgot to mention it, one of the things that we really knew going in but didn't have a solution for was the post-infusion chair time. For this therapy to work, a patient needs to maintain a reduced scalp temperature for a period between 1 and 3 hours. And for a lot of really busy sites, that post-infusion chair time is a problem. Once the chemo agents stop flowing through the pump, there is no longer any billable component of that patient treatment. And if they tie up a chair for an extended period of time, it inhibits the facility's ability to generate revenue. So we put a battery in the device. This device has a fairly meaningful battery life component, but what it allows you to do is move the patient very simply from the infusion environment to another area of the facility where they can finish their treatment.
How does the patient feel when the scalp's temperature is being lower and lower?
Initially, it feels like an ice cream headache. You eat ice cream too quick, you get a headache. That lasts for about 5 or 8 minutes. Over time, it is cold. I have worn it. I don't have very much insulation at all. It's like jumping into a cold swimming pool, albeit a very cold swimming pool. Over time, you get used to it. And many of the patients will have their doctor prescribe Ativan or some other pain relief medication for the treatment. So it's very well tolerated. For those that start treatment, fewer than 2% actually cease treatment because it's intolerable. And this new device, and thank you again for bringing it up, Gunnar, the new device actually has a completely redesigned cooling engine that circulates coolant continuously versus our old device, which through a series of sensors recognized the patient's scalp temperature and either sent more or less fluid through the device. Now we actually loop it continuously through and are able to raise the temperature slightly than what we were sending before with the same, being able to obtain the same range of temperature in the scalp by sending it out a little bit higher. That is also more tolerable.
Let's see if there's any questions from the audience. Några frågor? Nej, inte än i alla fall. You just sold quite a lot of devices the last period.
Yes.
So it just start to explore the market now.
We really are. Fewer than 10% in the United States, 10% of the cancer centers have a device, either ours or our competitors to date. So in the US, there's enormous upside potential. Globally, it's fewer than 5% of the cancer centers. So our competitor Paxman was cleared about a year and a half after we were. And that really has just created more awareness that this is a viable therapy option. So we have seen the amount of inquiry, the amount of interest on behalf of, again, patients and facilities increase fairly exponentially. And when you see a greater than 300% increase in the number of contracts signed with a big queue still in development now, it's really exciting for us that finally awareness is starting to reach a critical level where patients are walking into their doctor and saying, I want scalp cooling. And if I can't get it here, I will go down the street and get it somewhere else.
Do you have any negative reactions from the doctors?
Well, initially, and originally when the device was actually presented to the FDA, they put it down a very, very difficult pathway to market because of concern on the oncological side that providing an area for the scalp, for the cancer to metastasize to could create issues for patients later on. However, a significant number of studies, many of which came from Europe, convinced the FDA that if used correctly, i.e. for solid tumor cancer incidences that have very low scalp metastasization rates, it was safe and acceptable.
Thank you, Bill Cronin.
Tack, Gunnar.
Thank you.
Thank you.